And thank you for being here. The Congress has been in session this week, and we will be in session next week as well. And because this is a session day, we have the ability to introduce legislation. Before discussing the legislation that I am introducing today, I would like to introduce Meryl Weinberg, who is the CEO of the National Health Council. Thank you for being here. John Crowley, my friend from New Jersey. He and I are New Jerseyans together, who is the chairman and CEO of Amicus Therapeutics, and he is nationally recognized as a rare disease advocate. As I am sure you know, Mr. Crowley served as the inspiration for the 2010 motion picture Extraordinary Measures. The film chronicles Mr. Crowley's decade-long search to find a cure for a rare illness that was a challenge for two of his children, Megan and Patrick. I believe the illness is glycogen storage disease type 2. Is that right?
Or we call it Pompe disease, Congressman.
Pompe. And I am pleased that both of these distinguished colleagues in what I know is a national fight are here to lend their support to our efforts. These and many others care passionately about raising awareness for treatment and cures for individuals with rare and chronic diseases. And I thank everyone else for joining us today. To that end, I have introduced today the MODDERN Cures Act. This is a reintroduction of legislation that I have introduced in the last term of Congress. In an era of increasingly scarce resources for health research, it is critical that we ensure that outdated barriers in the regulatory system are removed and limited funds are spent more effectively to meet the needs of patients. The status quo is not yielding the treatments needed to address the growing epidemic of chronic disease. That is why it is vital that we update the regulatory system, remove barriers to innovation, and provide greater predictability in the search for therapies for unmet medical needs. I am introducing the Modernizing Our Drug and Diagnostics Evaluation and Regulatory Network Cures Act. Now that's a mouthful, but it's the MODDERN Cures Act. This bill will help get the right medicines to the right people and put patients first. The bill seeks to establish a modern regulatory system benefiting patients with a range of conditions by encouraging the discovery and development of new treatments for the many diseases that have few or no options at the moment. It would create a system that rewards efficiency and effectiveness for the benefit of all people with chronic diseases. Too many Americans, and indeed this is true across the globe as well, are facing severe health challenges. I believe that Congress has a responsibility to do what we can to facilitate a burgeoning life science sector that will bring greater care, comfort, and even a cure to rare diseases. And let me say that I have the honor of being the only Republican on the House Energy and Commerce Committee from the 6 states in New England, from New York or New Jersey. I'm very grateful to my leadership for placing me on the Committee of Jurisdiction for these issues. The Energy and Commerce Committee is that committee in the House that has a responsibility over the well-being and health of the American people. This is particularly true regarding its Health Subcommittee, on which I also serve. And let me say also that MODDERN Cures is bipartisan in nature. And many times in Congress we are criticized, and perhaps legitimately, for not being bipartisan. But these diseases know no party, and I am honored that we have co-sponsors from both sides of the aisle. At the moment, Democratic members who have chosen to be co-sponsors include Charlie Rangel of New York, Alison Schwartz of Pennsylvania, Ben Ray Lujan of New Mexico, Keith Ellison of Minnesota, and David Lobsack of Iowa. And I am grateful for their support. I am equally grateful for my Republican colleagues who have joined me. Peter Roskam of Illinois, he is the Chief Deputy Whip, very high in leadership. Brett Guthrie of Kentucky, and Mr. Guthrie serves on the Energy and Commerce Committee. Eric Paulson, my very close friend from Minnesota on Ways and Means. John Runyon, a fellow New Jerseyan. Peter King of New York. Michael McCall of Texas, who incidentally is the chairman of the Homeland Security Committee. Greg Walden, not only on the committee, but also importantly chairman of one of the subcommittees of the Energy and Commerce Committee. Pat Tiberi of Ohio, also on Ways and Means. Walter Jones of North Carolina. Billy Long of Missouri. And today, Michelle Bachmann of Minnesota has indicated that she will also become a co-sponsor. I think that this demonstrates that this legislation has support across this country, from all sections of the country, and I think it demonstrates that we have an excellent chance to move forward on this issue this year and into the new year in this term of Congress. I truly believe that passage of this legislation would have the ability to help save lives and certainly would add to the well-being and the good health of the American people. I'm pleased to be joined by Ms. Weinberg, and I would ask Ms. Weinberg to come to the podium and thank you for your remarks, the CEO of the National Health Council.
Well, first, I certainly want to thank you, Congressman Lance, for introducing this legislation. We also believe the MODDERN Cures Act has the potential to greatly improve the lives of people with chronic diseases and disabilities. As you heard, I'm head of the National Health Council, and the National Health Council is comprised of over 100 organizations and companies, all concerned about people with chronic diseases and disabilities. And we are recognized as the united voice for people with chronic conditions. The patient organizations in our membership are acutely aware of the hundreds of thousands of people with unmet medical needs who are desperately seeking treatment and hopefully someday a cure. The National Health Council, with all of our members and people across the country, is determined to turn the hopes of these people into reality. That's why we are extremely proud to work with Congressman Lance and the bipartisan group of supporters on passage of the MODDERN Cures Act. As you heard, current policies covering the development of drugs have not kept pace with the evolution of innovation in the United States. To use an analogy, think back to the wallpaper on your family's home when you were growing up. While the wallpaper then may have been fashionable at that time, it feels dated today. Styles and tastes have evolved. Like the wallpaper in your childhood home, current policies to promote drug development should be revisited and updated as is needed to make sure that they fit with today's environment. The MODDERN Cures Act also removes barriers to the development of treatments that did not exist when your wallpaper was in style. The MODDERN Cures Act creates a pathway for promising new treatments that address unmet medical needs that would not otherwise be developed. So these are products that absolutely, without this legislation, would stay on the shelves, would never be developed. The MODDERN Cures Act also provides a predictable introduction of generic equivalents for those new products. And the MODDERN Cures Act will promote personalized medicine. It encourages the development of companion diagnostics, which will help identify for an individual patient which treatment would be most effective and safe for that person. On behalf of the patient community, the National Health Council thanks Congressman Lance and the co-sponsors of what we feel is game-changing, transformative legislation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Merrill. Let me say that your remarks are right on point. Personalized medicine is really the wave of the future. And this country has a terrific record of innovation. The district I serve has more pharmaceutical and medical device employees than any other district in the nation. And we like to consider ourselves the medicine chest of this country and indeed of the world. Regardless of whether that is true, certainly the United States is the medicine chest of the world, and we have to make sure that that continues for the well-being, the good health of the American people, but also across the globe. And I think people throughout the developing world, in Africa and in Asia and in other places, look to the United States for our innovative leadership. And this will lessen the barriers that currently exist and will recognize that in the 21st century we have to encourage these types of treatments, and I am confident that we will be able to do that. It's now my honor to introduce my friend John Crowley. I think the best way to introduce him is to say that he is Megan and Patrick's father, and he is really the national and indeed international leader on this issue. Will you help me welcome John Crowley?
Thank you, Congressman Lance, and thank you all for coming today. You know, our journey into this world of rare diseases, unmet medical needs, began in 1998, hard to believe, 15 years ago, with that single word that so many families have heard, that word, diagnosis. You or your children have a condition, and we were told at the time that our children had this rare disease called Pompe disease, and that there were no treatments, very little research being done, and to just enjoy the time that we had. Well, together with many other leaders, and really it became the parents of these young children and adults with an adult form of Pompe, to step up and say that that's not acceptable, that we need to try something. And so we did. And we set out in this unique ecosystem that, as the Congressman indicated, really only happens, or certainly only happens best, in the United States. It's a model that requires patients, families, patient advocates, venture capitalists, small companies, large companies, academic research, research at the National Institutes of Health, the FDA, and it requires the Congress of the United States to act. All of those have to come together to make a difference. In this 15-year journey, we've seen what great science can do, and ours is a very challenging industry, and I wear sometimes two hats. One is the dad of two very special children with a rare neuromuscular disease, but also the hat of an entrepreneur and a leader of a biotechnology company. And biotech is a very tough business. You can raise millions, sometimes billions of dollars to advance research that most of the time just doesn't work. Because at the end of the day, science and medicine are really hard, and we can push it as far as we can and as fast as we can. I can't ask the members of Congress to cure Pompe disease or any other disease. It's going to take everybody as part of that ecosystem to affect as many of these disorders as we can, as many of the 7,000 rare diseases that collectively affect 30 million people just in the United States. But what I can ask of the Congress is to help create the incentives and the environment to let that ecosystem flourish, to encourage risk-taking, to encourage truly innovative therapies in areas where there are bottlenecks, to help us break through and encourage entrepreneurs, academic researchers, patient groups, all of those key constituencies to come together, all toward a common goal to extend and enhance human life. So with this MODDERN Cures Act, it's vitally important that we break down those barriers, and this will be one very important piece of legislation that will help to unleash that entrepreneurial spirit in America, help to foster medical innovation. It is good for American business, but more so, it is good for everybody in the world, especially the people with such traumatic, unmet medical needs. Hopefully, we'll be standing here years from now celebrating new successes in diseases that today have no hope. or even in diseases like our Pompe that have initial treatments but no cures. And that's what this legislation and the MODDERN Cures Act, we think and I hope can do. But it doesn't happen without a concerted effort, an effort from the patient community, an effort from industry to support, and certainly legislative leadership and support here on the Hill. And that's where, Congressman, your leadership has really been extraordinary. Just 3 years ago, we formed the Rare Disease Caucus, and as I went around the Hill speaking to members of Congress in the House and the Senate, explaining what rare diseases are, explaining how much unmet medical need is out there, a number of people listened, but one congressman who listened at the forefront was Congressman Lance, and has really taken this on as a passionate issue, and we need that level of leadership. It is certainly bipartisan. Representative Crowley, also the Democratic leader of the Rare Disease Caucus, also extraordinary in his leadership. And going forward, that's the type of leadership we need to see from the Congress of the United States. So I was so pleased to hear the names that you just put forward in support of this bill. I hope we can add many more names to that list, because I think the needs are so great and the cause is so important. So thank you for your friendship and continued leadership, and onward. Thank you.
Let me conclude by saying that the Rare Disease Caucus in the House of Representatives tries to advocate on these important issues. Congressman Crowley, who represents the New York District, he lives in Queens, one of the great boroughs of New York City, and he is the Democratic co-chair, I is the Republican co-chair of the Rare Disease Caucus, are extremely interested in making sure that rare diseases are addressed in further research, not only here in Washington at NIH, but through the entrepreneurial spirit of the American medical community. The former Republican co-chair of the Rare Disease Caucus was Congressman Upton, the chairman of the Energy and Commerce Committee, one of the most important members of Congress given his significant responsibilities. And when he became the chairman of Energy and Commerce, he asked me whether I would be willing to be the Republican co-chair of the Rare Disease Caucus. And I seized that opportunity, knowing that I was trying to fill the shoes of Chairman Upton, who I believe is doing a terrific job as chairman of our committee. And I hope moving forward, as John has said, that we will be able to expand the co-sponsors of this important legislation. I'm very gratified for those who have chosen to become initial co-sponsors on the legislation. I look forward to working with patient advocates across the nation, with the medical community, with the pharmaceutical communities, and with everyone else who is interested in this important issue. And I thank you all for being here, and let us hope that this is the session of Congress that will be able to enact what I believe is important legislation, MODDERN Cures. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.